I said last week that I wanted to talk a little bit about something that Lisa had said the week before, and which really kind of just really sort of grabbed my attention. I was really I was very engaged in what you said. So just to sort of like set that up, I had lunch with Jane two or 3 days ago. We met in Bell. Who the hell knows where Bell is? Cindy does. I mean, there are all these towns. I mean, why don't they just give all these different names, right? Why don't they just say it like, like 1, 2, 3. Anyway, there's Bell Gardens, but anyway, I never heard of it. And Huntington Park, I met K Group in Huntington Park. I didn't know where that was. These people are always going to Mexican restaurants for some reason. I'm getting tired of tacos. But anyway, so we met at this wonderful restaurant in Bell. Oh my goodness, it was really good. And we were working on a new little workshop that we want to create for Long Beach Meditation. And she's on her way she's already left to a 6-week, 5 or 6 week retreat in Washington State. Mount Cloud, I think it's called. And but anyway, so I had a yellow legal pad, and that was blank. It's been underneath a lot of things, and I pulled it out, and all of it. Was very pleased, so I don't have to buy another one. But I had written one little paragraph, probably like 6 or 7 years ago. I'm always copying wonderful sayings of wonderful teachers. And this one was and I was going to bring it to read to you all today. Does anyone see a yellow legal pad? So I did. But I can remember that it was Krishnamurti, and he had this, I don't think he ever said anything that wasn't wonderful. He was talking about the self, and he said, the self is the same in the most remote village in Africa or the east side of Manhattan. He said it's the same. He said the self, it wants to be happy. It wants to be secure. It wants to be safe. It wants to be loved. Of course, I'm paraphrasing. And then he said, and then of course, on the other hand, and then he said, he quoted the Buddha, which he doesn't do that much. He said that, but the Buddha taught that the mind is conditioned by greed, hatred, and delusion. So he said, not only does the self want to be happy and all of these things, but he said there's also this greed and hatred and delusion. And so he said, and then he said in parentheses, he said, could we call that the small mind? And I loved that, because that was actually what I was talking about right 2 weeks ago, if you all remember. I thought, see, he's not stupid, that man. So I gave, you remember, you had a very interesting question at the end. So I gave a little talk about my sort of conclusion that that we have actually a small mind, which is what Krishnamurti is referring to. The small mind would be, in Buddhist terms, conditioned by greed, hatred, and delusion. And then I think that we have probably a what you might call a big mind. I remember Teresa Fulton used to always talk, who comes every once in a while, she always talked about her bigger self. But there is, I think, in truth, there is something that is represented by the big mind. And then I actually think there's something represented by what we would call the no mind, which is what I was talking about. And don't ask me to repeat myself, because I can. But that was 2 weeks ago. So then at the end of it, Lisa, I thought I had done very well. And then Lisa said, well, yes, but so then she sort of looked down at her pants, right? And she says, but this is mine, isn't it? And it was just a wonderful moment, because I just thought, damn. It was like it's like a great question, It's like, is that the big mind, or is that the no mind, or is that the small mind, or what? But I mean, doesn't this belong to me? And it was a wonderful question, because I thought, and I said last week, I think it's a profound question. I think it's actually as profound a question as we could ask. And maybe, in some ways, it's really what our practice is all about. And to some extent, I think it actually is. And it was, what was interesting was the way I withdrew from trying to respond to it. I mean, I was just out of there, right? I thought, what is it? Get the hell out of Dodge? I mean, it's like I didn't want to go there in some way about, well, what does that mean? If this is mine, isn't it? And I remember when I left, I thought, well, I'm going to talk about that next week. And next week came, and I didn't. But this week, so this little poem, I said this last week. This little poem came to me. Really, all this stuff started flashing. I read this poem, and I want to read it again. I love it so much. And this is like Emily Dickinson, who's just the best. And it's the most provocative verse. You all have heard this. You didn't hear it, Robert, because you were not here, which I sort of like took offense with. But so this is the most provocative sentence. She says, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant." Yeah. Just love that. It's just essence, Emily Dickinson. Tell the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies, circuitous. Success in circuit lies, too bright for our infirm delight, the truth's superb surprise. Too bright for our infirm, think of a conditioned mind, for our infirmed delight, the truth's superb surprise. And then the other little 4 lines, as lightning to the children eased with explanation kind, right? A child is frightened by lightning, right? And then so a loving parent, as you might tell your little girls, you explain kindly, oh no, that's nothing scary, it's electricity, whatever in the sky. As lightning to the children eased with explanation kind, the truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind. I thought many times, what does she mean by truth? She spells it with a capital T, right, in this little poem. The truth can dazzle you, and unless if you gradually get the truth, she says, or otherwise you would just be blind. So for me, for our practice, I think the truth is the Dharma. That's what the truth is. And of course, that's really the definition. It's not like I'm not making something up here. The Dharma is, is described as the truth. What is, the truth? And it's almost impossible to put into words. But and then there are so many interesting controversies in Buddhism about the gradual path and how is it that we could gradually go towards enlightenment. I mean, the scholars worked on that for literally 1,000 years, and they have all these explanations. And maybe it seems intuitively obvious to you, but I can tell you right now that these scholars they found it very difficult to explain how we can gradually go towards enlightenment if we have all of these this conditioned mind of greed, hatred, and delusion. But we won't get into that. The reason why we won't get into it is because I couldn't. I'd get lost. So I wanted to set that up because it's like when you said that about this is mine, isn't it? My mind really immediately went to tell the truth but tell it slant. It's like, and I thought I was kind of dumbfounded because I couldn't figure out how to slant it. Right? So I just kind of just backed away from that. So I wanted to just share with you all today. Just to go back to the original, the early scriptures of what the Buddha said about this problem of this is mine, isn't it? And this belongs to me, does it not? And I want to read this to you and just sort of together, just kind of like we'll hold this idea of that it's a really profound question. What is mine? What belongs to me? Because if you focus that on the external possession, you have a nice car, by the way, and I'm a little envious of it, Marta. You know, it's a lot nicer than my '99 Saturn. I'm here to tell you. But you know, it's like if we focus on the external, you know, this belongs to me, and so this country is mine. You know, I mean, we can whatever. I'm an American. The Buddha is suggesting that we focus not on the object but the subject. So in other words, he's suggesting that right immediately, and if I were Mr. Buddha last week, and I actually had this in my head, not that I was smart enough to realize what he would have probably said. He would have said, well, who are you? If this is mine, who is that it belongs to? He would have wanted you to go back and inspect, right, who owns anything. Do we own anything? To the degree that we have a substantial self, we own something. Because that's one way that we actually define what we are about what we have, isn't it? I mean, you know, I am a male, I'm a human, I've got a couple of degrees, blah, blah, blah. I have a Saturn. So he said, I'm going to just read some of these because these are the classical statements, and so, you know, we don't go over them enough, and I thought it'd be just good to hear them again. Then I'm going to read you kind of a wonderful statement by this guy who was writing about psychoanalysis. But so this is one of the things that the Buddha said. This body does not belong to you, nor anyone else. Well, that's kind of strange. Well, if it doesn't, it does belong to me, right? So, you know, that's rather provocative. This body does not belong to you, nor to anyone else. It should be regarded as a result of former acts that have been constructed and intended, and it is to be experienced. So he's not saying that you should dismiss it, but he says this body is to be experienced. Now, right off the bat, if you go through any of the old teachings, it's called and it is really in yoga. It's also taught, and it's called the negative via negativa. But they say, you know, you find out what is by eliminating what is not. Right. The way you get to the truth is to eliminate what is not true. And then, as we say, lead us from the unreal to the real, which is, you know, the most profound prayer. So, the Buddha would say that the body is not me, you know, and he would say the feelings are not me. Their body is the body. The feelings, are, you know. And so it's called the five aggregates, the famous five aggregates, or the upadana of. And what do? They grasp. So anyway, this is the next to that would be from the Dharmapada. He said, when by wisdom one perceives that all things are not one's self, which is translated as anatta. That's the anatta, the three characteristics, right? Dukkha, anicca, anatta. Anatta means non-self. Some people say that it means no self. There's tremendous arguments in the whole world of Buddhism about that. It's just quite amazing to read, and they're all brilliant, and they'll prove their point, you know, because they were brilliant. He says, when by wisdom, which is that last kind of thing up there on the tree, when by wisdom one perceives that all things are not oneself, anatta, then one turns away from suffering, and he says that is the path of purification. So now I'm going to read you this is the one that is probably most quoted. It's what popped into my brain when you said these are my pains. And this is, and you know, and really we could do this every week. I'm not kidding. I mean, there's nothing. This is like the seminal statement that he made about ownership. That's wonderful. Bhikkhus, he said. Bhikkhus means boys. It means monks. So sometimes he would say bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, but today he just said bhikkhus. Bhikkhus. Form is not oneself. Okay? So, Cindy's nodding. Now he's just announcing to you that form is not you. Okay? I know, Beverly, that's hard for you to get, but form is not oneself. What is not oneself should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom. Thus, and this is the famous sentence, this is not mine, this I am not. This is not myself. So then he goes on and says, feeling is not oneself. Perception is not oneself. Formations, thoughts, all the things that we construct, all of the proliferations of all the stories, they're not oneself. And then finally he says, just to really put the clinker on it, consciousness, even consciousness, is not oneself. He said, what is not oneself should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Now that's the really famous thing, right? I mean, this is not mine, this is not myself, this I am not. So the question is he saying that there's no self in there? Because some people argue that he is saying that, or was saying that. And then lots and lots of scholars will say, and quite convincingly, no, he's not saying that. He's saying whatever this is, it's not in that. It's not that, right? It's not in things, right? And also, whatever it is, it's not, you've got to, whatever it is, it's what is lasting after you have eliminated form, feeling, perception, right? Consciousness. Is there something else? Is there something that is left of you when you eliminate body and mind? That's, to some extent, only you can answer that. Only you can answer that. I think there is, but I think that it is absolutely impossible for us to put it into words. We can say, what am I, right? You might have this absolute feeling that there is, when everything is stripped away, there is something that still remains. But what it is, no one has ever been able to say. I'll read that. I'll read, in a sense, one way of saying it. A beautiful poem. So, if you go to a place in meditation of just complete stillness, when you sit, and those of us who are lucky enough to have long sits, extended sits where the mind gets more and more quiet and more still and more still. It doesn't happen necessarily in 45-minute sit, where you're also planning what you're going to do this evening and have dinner or whatever. But if you have this experience of sitting for longer periods, which is a blessing, you can go to a place where the mind does not ask, is it this or that? You can go to a place where there's no yes or no. There's no before or after. I mean, there's no discursive thinking, right? It's just not doing that. And so, as I've told you all, I think over and over, we all, Ajahn Chah referred to it as a still forest pool. But in that experience of the mind being quiet, I think that you could really say, the question, is this mine? It wouldn't come up. I mean, in that profound silence of being, it's just not. That's a question I think that would only come up in where the mind is more in discursive, dichotomistic, right? Is it this or that, right? I mean, logical thought. But in other words, do we have the capacity to go to a deeper place where that question just doesn't come up? And I would say absolutely. And I would also say that that's the explanation to some extent of why the Buddha did not answer some questions. So you go, if you ask the Buddha the question, well, is the self real or unreal? He would just smile at you, right? Or if you said, well, is there a life after death? He wouldn't answer those questions, because maybe those questions are actually coming from the smaller mind that needs yes or no, and maybe his mind was just not in that place. So there was nothing he could actually even say to it. He probably couldn't even respond to it. I suspect that's probably true. I can't imagine a mind that's constantly in that no mind. That the big, but I think that to some extent, what was so wonderful was your honesty and your willingness to just ask that question from that place, you know, and for me, I couldn't quite find a interface to it. I couldn't get on a level of. I was confused. So this is a guy. His name is Stephen Mitchell, and he wrote a book with an amazing title, "Hope and Dread in Psychoanalysis." Isn't that a good title? I love that a lot. You know, as a therapist, you know, can I ever relate? Hope and Dread in Psychoanalysis. This is really, I was very taken by this. And by the way, I'm almost finished. Well, unless I get another win, a second win, right? This is really wonderful. You all like it. Think of self, which is what we're talking about. Okay? What is the self? Think of self as operating like cinematic film, which is, you know, that's been used over and over and over in terms of even Buddhist teachers. Composed of discrete, discontinuous pictures that, when run together, create something very much continuous and integral. Now, this is I'm going to confess I haven't read the book. I got this, a copy of this from another book, and I like it so much I might read his book. But I suspect that he has a Buddhist background, because a discrete, discontinuous moments of consciousness is the basic description, the way the Buddha described our consciousness. I mean, and people have been confused about it ever since, you know, because he also implied that there is a continuous stream of consciousness. Two Vijnana, there are two streams, and they literally, by the time the Abhidharma, the scholars started writing about it, I mean, they started breaking up into groups, and I understand there were 18 schools within 300 years of the Buddha's death. There were 18 different schools, and most of which, you know, all of which have basically disappeared. Theravada is one of those 18, or at least related to one of them. Vipassana meditation, that's how old Vipassana is. But anyway, I just wanted to say that statement about this, you know, that is really the way he supposedly in profound meditation saw consciousness, that it actually is discrete moments, right? That and as we were sitting in the sound, and there was sound outside, I was really enjoying listening to it and noticing that it really is not continuous. If you really are able, I mean, it's not like the illusion is that the sound has happened like that. But the more your mind gets still, you begin to see that. Well, the truth is, the sound might be discontinuous, but certainly not consciousness. Consciousness is just doing that on it, right? So one would not be arguing the sound. I mean, maybe that is continuous. Who knows? But the experience cannot be continuous because consciousness is like that. It's like a laser. It's so fast. In other words, it focuses on that sound just like that. It's incredibly fast. And so, of course, you have the illusion. You're hearing that sound like that. So again, you know, it's so important to distinguish. Right? We're not talking about we don't. You know, all we know is what we experience through discontinuity, right? Which we call continuous. Well, I don't know if that made any sense, because I don't think I made any sense. All right, so this guy says the self, think of it as like a film, okay? And then he says, of course, with both film and what we call the self, in a literal sense, the experience of motion and continuity is an illusion. Well, I just said that, didn't I? Yet this is extremely dull and misleading literalness. I love that he said. He said this is very misleading and dull. The illusion creates an experience, and by the way, illusion in parentheses. The illusion creates an experience that has a powerful subjective richness of its own, creating a larger moving picture moving, I think maybe, moving could have a dual meaning there, right? It could be a moving experience as well as a moving picture. Very different from and much more than the simple sum of the discrete pictures. Each frame is both a discrete, discontinuous image and a subunit of a larger continuous process that takes on a life of its own. The most interesting feature of contemporary psychoanalytic perspective on self as precisely the creative tension between the portrayal of self as multiple and discontinuous and of self as integral and continuous. Does that make sense? It's really beautiful. So he's saying, if we analyze the self down to the discrete sort of things, as the Buddhism will tend to do, then it is like this sort of like it's not real. There's nothing there, right? And as he said, it's kind of dull, and it leaves out something about the lived experience of life. I mean, it leaves something of the richness of being out. I think probably intuitively we know. I'm going to read this poem, and then. So, I just want to suggest to everybody that the question, who am I? What am I? What is this? It can't be answered by, sort of like some sterile sort of Buddhist or any other discipline, some sentence of that, it can only be experienced in your own unique way inside. And as we sit and as we meditate, we are sitting with whatever we are, whatever this is, we're with it, right? As we sit here, and so that's why I so love you asking that question, because it's like you're willing to ask those questions, and you're willing to try to figure this out, and I think that the answer to is this mine is everybody in here would have their own unique answer to that, but it all is based on your experience of what mind means, your experience of the self, how much we are defined by outside things, by what we own, as opposed to how much we are free of any identification or even definition. So that's why I love this poem so much. And for the geese, do you know the geese? This is a beautiful poem. So I want to read this because it just, for some strange reason, I find a lot of comfort in what she says, and this is Mary Oliver, and she really does go right to the heart of a profound question, and it's not, she's, as great poets do, she just talks around the question, but I get an answer in it, out of it. She says, you do not have to be good. Well, someone should have told me that when I was a little boy, because I wasn't very good. You do not, well, I tried. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. That's pretty intimate, isn't it? You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about your despair, yours, and I'll tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the dear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscape, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination. It calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. Does that respond to some extent to the question, who am I? It does for me. The idea that in some profound way we have a place in this everything, and to some extent, I would say the degree to which we have pulled into and away from the everything and defined as kind of a personality, a self that is not real, is the degree to which we are then separated from and disconnected from our place in the family of things. You know? So the degree to which we are able to let go of that clinging to this personality, this view of self, is the degree to which we become maybe free like the wild geese.